Okay, it's 11 a.m. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be presenting this logistics webinar, What to Expect in 2023. We have Robert Ferreras, our COO, Travis Frank from the Port of Charleston, and David Dembitzer, our COO. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to go through how to use the platform so you can understand how to interact with us and ask any questions. If you go to the top right of your screen, you will see a chat bubble. You can type, any questions you have if you're having issues hearing, anything like that. I'll be moderating the webinar throughout the hour. And then if you go to the tab to the right of that chat bubble, you'll see another chat bubble with a question mark inside of it. That's where you can post any questions you have for the group. And we're going to be holding all of those until the end of the presentation. So please use that in order to ask questions. Then we also have right next to that is our polls. If you could just answer that question for us, that would be very helpful. And then we have right next to it, you'll see a little gift icon. If you hover over, it says offers. That's where you can request a quote from us if you're interested in getting a rate sheet or a price list on our services. So just to get started, we have our agenda for today. So this is going to be our agenda overview. First, we're going to start with our introductions. Then we're going to go into the logistics industry outlook for Robert, and then using the Port of Charleston with Travis, and then using a 3PL logistics provider with David, and then we'll have our closing and questions. Basically, if you ask a question, whoever the subject matter expert is on that question will be answering it. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Robert.
Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everyone being on this call. And although I can't see you, I think it's important to thank each and every one of you for your participation today. Our goal is twofold here. I can tell you we don't have a crystal ball, but we do have quite a bit of experience. So one of the things we want you to get out of this presentation here is to maybe get you thinking of some alternatives and kind of learn from some of the things we've learned over the last couple of years, which we'll share with you today. We're going to start with I'm going to talk a little bit about geopolitics and the impact on the supply chain. We all know that's going to become a big factor here very soon, if it hasn't already. Talk a little bit about population growth and what's coming down the pike and how you might want to be prepared for some of this. We want to talk about labor and technology. That's a huge factor in our industry itself in terms of how it impacts the supply chain. If you haven't already seen and haven't experienced what's out there, I want to talk a little bit about what some of the impacts are and what's going on there. I'm going to talk a little bit about supply chain resilience. And, that's a term that you're going to start to hear quite a bit. It's become a big buzzword in the logistics industry. This pandemic has taught us a lot of lessons, and a lot of it kind of centers around this concept of supply chain resilience. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, we want to discuss a little bit about outsourcing to a 3PL and some of the advantages of that. And David will be covering some of those topics as well. Brittany, if you can jump to our first slide. So geopolitics is again, and I don't have a crystal ball, but if you're not up to date with current events, and you're not concerned about Taiwan, or you're not concerned about how your supply chain is going to be affected should there be some kind of geopolitical event in the world, you're something, you should be thinking about it. It's creating heightened risks, and it's increasing wages. This whole evolving trade agreements, it's really forcing companies to rethink what should be done. And a lot of companies that, as they look at what they're doing today, it really focuses around what's going on in the world. We're going to get different perspectives, but the one thing that I want to make sure everybody leaves with this today is you got to start with a strategy. This is something that we can help you with as a partner in the logistics world, but you definitely got to look at a strategy. We've helped a number of customers to reduce the risks, if you will, of the impacts in this particular arena. So go to the next bullet point. So let's talk a little bit about short-term considerations or options. And a lot of people have already taken an interim solution to safeguard against any kind of potential trade flow disruptions. And something, and this is obviously easier said than done, but the fact is that a lot of companies are moving their supply chain, or they're moving their factories over to different destinations in the Southeast Asia Pacific arena. We've seen people move plants or production to Vietnam. Philippines has become a big popular destination right now for some of this stuff. We ourselves, for example, in our labor pool, we started to outsource some work to the Philippines in an effort to try to stay competitive in some areas. But it's certainly something that you got to put something in short term, and that's something you want to consider, at least as an alternative. Now, long term, it's a little different. Long term is going to require a lot more work. A lot of companies, if you haven't, and I wish I can see some of you to ask you to raise your hands, but I can tell you that long term, a lot of companies are completely overhauling their supply chain. And again, this is something that we can help you with. We've worked with many clients where we look at their distribution, and we figure out where the main populations of their end user customers are, and we try to position different supply sources closer to those people. There's a lot of things that we can do in this arena, but when it comes to the long term, more and more companies are shifting production closer to their consumers. At the end of the day, if I can shorten that cost to get to my consumer, I'm that much better off. And historically, it's looking like about 70% of companies from a recent poll are trying to move to that arena. Brittany, let's go ahead and go to the population size. So, the population, and I can tell you that this is a real number. We're looking at the middle class, when it comes to demographics, and this is really worldwide, but the middle class is going to double, in the next decade. Okay, now, I'm going to preface it with, I think about 30% of this is 30 to 40% of it is expected to come out of China. So the middle class in China, but the reality is that across the board, we're going to see a huge demand. We're going to see increased levels of consumption. We're going to see really an acceleration of getting product to consumer. Our role as an organization, in general, we like to say that we want to help you connect your production to your consumption, and this is really where it starts to make a lot of sense, because now, as we've all gotten used to some of the industry standards that have been set, where you can order something and have it at your doorstep in 2 days or in 1 day. That's not going to stop. That's going to continue. And with the population growth, that's going to create a lot of opportunity for us to work together so that we can help you deliver that type of service level so that you can compete. And again, in this arena, it's a big factor. Brittany, let's go on to the next slide. And by the way, if you have questions, I know Brittany brought them up, but if you have questions, certainly put them in the chat. And I can see that some of the questions are already starting to come through, so we'll try to get them answered. Labor and technology is probably the biggest arena that impacts our business in the 3PL space and logistics space. And as David starts to talk a little bit about later on in our presentation about the advantages of 3PL, that technology sector is a huge section that allows us to compete. As an organization, we've invested quite a bit into that space, and it goes hand in hand with that labor market. The reality is that immigration policies are tightened all across the board. Okay. And so whether you have a facility in California or one in the Northeast or one in coming out of Texas, you're going to have you're going to feel the pain of shortages. Go ahead and go to the next slide, or the next. You're going to feel you're going to feel shortages in that market. It's going to, as a result, increase the need to adopt technology to compensate for that. And I want to make sure everybody understands here. There's a big myth about technology. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to employ robots to run your distribution. That's not the case. When we say that 30% of the workforce can be replaced, a lot of this, what I'm talking about is simple technology like barcode scanning, warehouse management technology, things like that. These are all things that have a direct impact that will help bridge the gap between that shortage in the labor pool and meeting that service level that's needed. Another way that companies are trying to impact their costs or reduce their costs, become more efficient, is whether it's geographical or operational diversification. It's something that's going to impact you. And I want to point this out because we're actually a pretty good example of this. When we talk to our customers and we talk about how we can help them improve their supply chain, one of the factors that come into play here is the cost of storing goods, cost of bringing product in. Travis will talk a little bit about some of the advantages going through Port of Charleston. But for example, we listened to our customers, and our customers said, "Hey, we have some long-term storage. We want to stock up on some of our inventories. So we need an attractive, lower cost solution." So we went out to the Charleston area and we built a $340,000 square foot facility to help compensate for that, right? And while the labor costs across the board are probably about the same, the real estate pricing, the whole cost of storing materials in that region of the world is so much more cost effective, and it's just another example of that geographic diversification. On the operational side, it's pretty much the same thing. It's basically just changing what we're doing to become more efficient. There's a lot in that particular arena that we can cover as well. Brittany, if you want to go to the next. And of course, at the end of the day, there's a lot of technology, whether it's barcoding, whether it's a warehouse management system, whether it's RFID technology. These are all solutions that have been in play for years, and a lot of people are using it today. But those little cost savings in time and labor, if I don't have to write it down and manually enter it into a system to track it, just become that much more efficient, and it plays a big part in this whole process. So let's talk a little bit about supply chain resilience, because again, this is something that you're going to hear the term quite a bit in the industry today. And the reality is that, we as an organization have to reevaluate our own strategy in the logistics world, and so will you. You need to consider and rethink your strategy in terms of where the production is and where the logistics are and where the end user customer is. And again, it's something that a lot of companies have been doing for years, but now you might have to change that. All the things that are going on in the industry today, whether it's politics, whether it's the cost of living, labor pool, all that stuff is really you really need to rethink how you're going to do things. And this is an area that we encourage everybody to start thinking about. Go ahead and go to the next bullet. Diversifying your manufacturing base across multiple regions. Again, when I mentioned earlier that we have customers that are moving some of their plants to Vietnam or to the Philippines. This is all in the aim to mitigate any risks involved in that will impact the supply chain. And I want to bring up a good example of we have a client that actually thought way ahead. They were way ahead of the curve, and they brought in a significant investment in inventory. And during the pandemic, while everybody was struggling to meet demand, this particular client had their strategy well put in place. They had inventory, at higher levels than they normally do. Yes, so they incurred some carrying costs, but they definitely benefited from that. And the fact that they had different plants across different regions made a big impact. The fact that they're invested in a higher inventory level really did safeguard them from a lot of the disruptions, and it's one of the things you'll want to consider. And again, this goes back to let's figure out what makes the most sense for you. This is something that we can definitely help you with, and this is an area where there's a lot of different factors that go into play. We can look at your transportation going from different distribution points to the end user customer. If we can shorten some of that, it might cost justify maybe adding more distribution points if we can reduce on one end. So it's really about sitting down and looking at that whole strategy and figuring out how we can make it better. So with that said, I hope if you have any questions, please make sure you put them on put them into the chat. But let me hand it over to Travis Frank, and I'll let Travis take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. Much appreciated. Thanks for having me today. Just a little background on myself. I'm on the commercial sales team here for the South Carolina Ports Authority. So we own and operate the marine terminals across the state. And our large one is the Port of Charleston. So Brittany, if you could go to the next slide, please. So there's a few things that are a little different about South Carolina ports and the Port of Charleston than some other port authorities that you might be used to doing business with. I think the main one is that we're an owner-operator port authority. So that means that we own and operate all the land on our terminals. So we're not a landlord port. We don't have a third party operating the terminals. It is our folks out there loading and unloading the ships and doing all the functions on the marine terminals. And so that means if you have any sort of issues, if you need help with anything related to your international commerce, you can call us and we can help. We are the number 8 largest port authority in the country. And because of that, we've been growing a lot of our infrastructure, and you see the capacity note there. We've invested $3 billion. We've invested $3 billion in the operation over the last few years. I saw a few questions come in. I think I'll get to those towards the end. Brittany, if you go to the next slide, please. So within that $3 billion CapEx plan, there's a few things, just some of the major initiatives I'd like to point at here. Added new cranes to our terminals. So the Wando terminal, that's what you see in the top left corner. The top right is our new Hugh Leatherman container terminal. So we're just adding capacity, newer, larger cranes, and also deepening the harbor. So we completed that project towards the end of last year, made us the deepest harbor on the eastern Gulf Coast at 52 feet. So that means that we can bring in ships 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're not restricted by the tides. So we are connected from Asia, Europe, South America, all the major ports in the world you can bring in and out of the Port of Charleston. Also in the top left of that slide is a picture of a few chassis. So we had 15 months in a row of record volume through the pandemic. It was fantastic for the Port Authority, but it also acted as a bit of a stress test. And one of the areas that we realized we needed to improve upon was chassis. We had a regional chassis pool that we used to provide equipment for the Port of Charleston, the South Atlantic chassis pool. So now we've got our own pool. It's called the Smart Pool. We went out and bought 13,000 brand new pieces of equipment. They're all GPS shipped, brand new. So we're very excited about that. And then lastly, the last slide there references our new intermodal facility, which is under construction. We have CSX and Norfolk Southern both operating in Charleston today. And that new facility will be located right next to our Hugh Leatherman terminal. We'll have both of those companies operating in that facility. If you could go to the next slide, please. A couple other things I'd like to point out are our inland ports. So we, as I mentioned, we own and operate the Port of Charleston, which is sort of the classic marine terminal that we would all think of, but we also own and operate two inland ports, one in Dillon, South Carolina, and one in Greer, South Carolina. And they operate sort of like a marine terminal, but they're about 200 miles inland. We own and operate the land here in the terminals as well. But really what these tools do is they sort of give you an extra layer of flexibility. So you can extend your reach 200 miles to the interior. These are 24/7 facilities, only access from the Port of Charleston. So back and forth on a daily rail service to and from the Port of Charleston. Greer is operated by Norfolk Southern and Dillon by CSX. The rail portions are. If you need any more information on that or you'd like more information on that, I encourage you to visit our website. Brittany, next slide, please. So some of the cost savings. I think if you come and do business in South Carolina, if you're used to doing business in a place like California or New York, the cost savings are going to be pretty tremendous. You're going to see those on the labor side, the lease side, so the warehousing side, and then also on the trucking side. Across the board, those costs are going to be lower. We can help get you connected with trucking companies. Obviously, IronLink is a fantastic warehouse provider, so they are the best in the business at doing that. And then also, too, one thing I'd like to point out is our port tax credit. So that is a tax credit that you're eligible for. Users are eligible for if they experience year-over-year container growth through the Port of Charleston. So that's up to $200 per container with a maximum credit of $1 million. Doesn't cost anything to apply. And again, that's based on your year-over-year container growth through the Port of Charleston. So I know I've mentioned a lot of things today. I guess the big takeaway is that we're an easy place to do business. We're a friendly environment to do business. We're a pro-business environment. And if you need anything related to the Port of Charleston or South Carolina, you can reach out to me and I'll be available. And Brittany, next slide. Perfect. Thank you.
Travis, thank you for that. It was very informative. And we appreciate you joining us. It's very hard to get a representative from any port to join us for a webinar. So this just speaks to how easy it is to do business with the Port of Charleston. So thank you for being here. I'm going to speak a little bit about the advantages of using a 3PL and outsourcing to us. We obviously are going to go through a little bit of what IronLink is about. We obviously have to plug IronLink here, but we're going to speak more broadly about the industry, what we do and how we do it. Next slide, please, Brittany. So some of the advantages of using us of using a 3PL is providing your customer base, your ship to points with options that are closer to your delivery points. And speaking to that, that's when you're using a 3PL, you're really able to spread your inventory across the country without having to worry about putting up new buildings or, getting new labor pools, things like that, and then scaling your business. So we see a lot of customers that come to us and they're very focused on B2B or, B2C, where they're only shipping to businesses or only shipping to consumers, and then they want to pivot to one or the other. And what we, see is that becomes a very difficult situation for them. Using a third-party provider that is very well versed in all aspects of logistics and supply chain really eliminates the need to have to scale or pivot, which, as we all know, is not the easiest thing to do in business in general, especially in today's market. Some of the other things that a 3PL provider can offer, go back a second, Brittany. Some of the other things that a 3PL provider will offer is obviously transportation, returns processing, and things like that. One of the big perks of using a 3PL is you're able to estimate your operational costs really down to a pallet level, a carton level. You know exactly what it's going to cost you to handle that package on the inbound, store it, and then ship it as needed. When you're using a 3PL, you're essentially saying, let me focus on what I'm good at, which is the buying and selling, and allow the experts that know the business, that understand warehousing very well, to handle the logistics piece of it, so that you don't have to focus on that and you can do what you do best. Next slide, please. So some of the services that we offer is obviously drayage, transportation, get the container to the port of your choosing, and then give it to us and we'll handle it from there. We work with several drayage partners throughout the country to ensure that your containers are picked up, delivered, and then returned in a timely fashion. This also actually helps when, for us, when we're handling more pieces of the supply chain, we're really able to help you reduce your costs. We've seen that the customers that allow us to handle their drayage and their outbound shipping incur little to no demurrage, per diem, less chassis days on average when it comes to drayage, just because we're overseeing the entire supply chain, or as much of it as we possibly can. Some of the other services that we offer is pick and pack. That's for direct to consumer, cross-docking and transloading. Sometimes, you bring containers in and they need to go to a rail and they need to go cross country. We actually boast one of the shortest turnaround times in the industry. And then we have a whole array of value-added services, anything that is that can be very specific or very broad. We really do it all. So whether it's labeling and ticketing, handling the outbound shipping, we obviously work with UPS, FedEx, all the local carriers, and we get better pricing because of that. And then we do all sorts of kitting and packaging, anything that may be needed to get your product where it needs to go. And what I always like to say is, our warehouse is your warehouse. Anything you would do in your own warehouse, we'll do for you, except we'll do it better because it's what we do every single day. Transportation, as we mentioned, so there's the drayage on the inbound and then trucking on the outbound, and then reverse logistics, so handling returns, documenting the returns, either disposing of them as needed or repackaging them so that they can be sent out again to another customer. Next slide, please. So a little bit about IronLink specific. We like to say we're the fastest, although I can't prove that as of yet. We are a very fast growing industry leader. We have gone from 7,000 square feet, which we started with 4 years ago, to over 800,000 square feet cross country. We've partnered with several, as we call them, our key accounts. We provide them with advanced logistics services. We improve their supply chain visibility, and we reduce their distribution costs. And our job is to help you get your products to market as soon as possible. We understand that when your capital is tied up in inventory, the last thing you want is for that inventory to be tied up and not getting where it needs to go for you to turn that capital. We provide warehousing and transportation solutions for Fortune 500 or very large companies, as well as small ones. but we see it all. We've done it all. We haven't had this kind of growth because we don't know what we're doing. We have this growth because we are very customer focused. Our customer service is top notch. We're very into understanding our customers and partners' businesses. We want to understand every piece of it and provide assistance wherever we can. So, for us, it really is a partnership. We want to get involved. We want to be able to help and drive your costs down, turn your product quickly, and really be able to take the headaches out of the logistics world and put it on us. To us, it's not a headache. It's just something that we do every single day. Currently, we have 7 facilities strategically located. I believe the next one of the next slides is going to be a map, and we'll go through them there. And we currently have over 800,000 square feet with plans to double them by the end of 2024. We have a nationwide network of partners, whether it be in trucking, shipping solutions, supplies, things like that. I know that we talked a little bit about labor, and we have partnered with some of the greatest labor agencies in the country that really help us get what we need done. We do not, when everyone was struggling through COVID and the last couple of years, there was a lot of stress in the market, and people, other providers or any company really was struggling with labor. And thankfully, our partnerships really helped us get through that time and be able to deliver every single day in the same manner that we were before and after. So, those partnerships are really important to us. We have currently, like I said, 7 facilities strategically located near key ports throughout the U.S. We have 3 locations near the Port of LA and Long Beach. We have 3 locations near the Port of New Jersey, and we have our newest location and really our largest to date, our pride and joy in the Charleston market. It's 18 miles from the Port of Charleston, brand new 342,000 square foot facility, grade A, top notch, top of the line building. We're very excited about that one. Some of our customers, next slide, please, Brittany. Just a little overview of some of our customers, and really we do everything, like it says, apparel, home goods, small appliances. We're getting every one of our facilities are going to be food grade approved, so we can handle any food grade product, liquor, really anything that needs a warehouse we can store, and we do it really well. And in closing, I think this is the last slide for me. The key takeaway here is that our customers, their focus is obviously buying and selling product. The warehousing aspect of it sort of becomes a back burner for them. It's something that they think they need or that they do need, but it's not something that they focus on, and it's not something that everybody is very good at. The difference when you use a third-party provider, whether it be us or anybody else, is that's what we do every single day. That's what we're focused on. The same way that, maybe you're not going to change the brakes on your car because you're going to let the mechanic do it. Maybe you shouldn't be handling the warehousing. You should allow the experts in the industry to do it for you. And we've seen, both ways. Some of our customers have opened their own warehouses and then come to us after and said, hey, look, this is a disaster. We can't do this anymore, and we need you guys to do it. And then we've had customers that have said, hey, well, maybe we're getting too big and we want to go and open our own warehouse. And 9 out of 10 times, the ones that go and open their own warehouse struggle, and they end up coming back to us. So, this is just something that should be put out there. Allow the experts to do what they do best. Come to IronLink. We'll welcome you with open arms. And anyone that has any questions, obviously, I see we're putting this quite a few questions in the chat. I'm going to hand it back over to Robert to run through them and decide who answers what. But thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it, taking some time out of your busy schedules. And feel free to reach out with any questions.
Brittany, do you want to go through a couple of the questions and maybe read off some questions, and let's see who can get to answer them?
Sure. Okay. So we have one question from the chat here. With acceleration in the adoption of technology use, what are you seeing in the increase in power requirements for your warehouse facilities?
Okay, so I can certainly take that. And so I can tell you that from a power requirement in a facility, a lot has to do with whatever automation is being put in place. And if you are going to put any kind of conveyance or any type of material handling, power is a big factor, and it certainly goes into the planning when that implementation goes into play.
Okay, next question is, how much inventory do you recommend keeping on hand to prevent supply chain disruptions?
So I'll take that one. And the answer really lies with the customer and depends on their needs. During COVID, you couldn't get any products from any warehouse, no matter who you were. So that was a good time to really stock up on product. Today's day and age, we're seeing a lot of that inventory that was sitting for a while shrink, and people are going back and reordering. So today my answer will be different than it'll be in 3 months from now. But really, it depends on it's very customer specific, and what your business is, what your sales look like. Some of our customers are seeing tremendous spikes in sales, and others are seeing slowdowns. But this is something that we'd love to sit with the client and really understand their business and plan accordingly with them.
Okay, next question is, what is the typical distance from the end consumers that you would advise groups to set up in a new distribution center?
And I can take that. So, again, that's also a subjective question, but we can tell you that depending on the industry, you may need to be closer to your consumer. It just varies on the product. And I'll give you a good example that we have a client that is a supplier of blank T-shirts to print shops. So therefore, in their particular environment, it is critical for their distribution points to be closer to where the print shops are printing these T-shirts and doing this kind of work. So that's a little bit different than, for example, if you're storing washing machines and you're going to be getting them to different retail distribution warehouses, right? So it just varies. This is an area where we definitely want to help and look at what you're doing so we can come up with a solution for you.
Excellent. Travis, this one's for you. Are there benefits to being an owner-operated port?
Absolutely. And I'd love just to go back a little bit and expand on what Robert said and talk a little bit about my experience on that last question. And I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of how far you should be away from the end user or the end consumer. It totally, from our experience, it completely depends on the business and who's paying for the shipping. And so a lot of times if customers are paying only to bring that inventory to their warehouse, well, then they want to be as close to a port as possible so they can get that cost down. If they're paying for the domestic trucking as well, then maybe it makes sense to be somewhere closer to the end consumer. So, Robert, you're 100% right there. Completely depends on the business. But for any of those businesses that need to be close to a port, IronLink, as David mentioned, is only 18 miles away from our port terminals. So to jump over to that next question, the benefits of being an owner-operator port. I think being an owner-operator port is a huge benefit. There are a couple other ports in the United States that use this model, but the vast majority of ports are landlord ports. And what that means is somebody else operates the terminal, and they don't really have any incentive to make it run well. I mean, they get paid rent every month by the operators, and they're happy. For us, we take pride in what goes on our terminals. And the biggest difference would be the folks in the ship-to-shore cranes, the individuals that are loading and unloading the ships. Those are typically, that's a union function. In Charleston, those are Port Authority, South Carolina employees. Those folks are incentivized based off of their productivity. So in order for those people to make more money, they want to move more boxes safely but quickly. In the other model, that's an hourly position. So they will make more money the longer it takes to load and unload a ship. So it's a completely opposite model That's what makes us the most efficient port in the country, and what allows us, our crane operators, to average about 35 container moves per hour per crane.
And I guess a follow-up question for Travis. When is the Leatherman terminal expected to be operating at full capacity?
If I may just, before you answer that, Travis, if I may just add to your last, your last answer, from being in the warehousing business and having to deal with dwell times and ports being shut down and not being able to get appointments. For us, I think the one of the biggest benefits of being close to an owner-operated port is that if our customer's container is stuck on a ship or it's a hot container, we can actually pick up a phone and speak to somebody and say, hey, look, we really need this container, and they can make it happen. And short story, but when I was looking into the Charleston market, I spoke to somebody who actually introduced me to Travis, one of our customers that has a facility there. And they told me that they were able to call Travis from when the ship docked. They were able to call Travis on his cell phone, and within 45 minutes, there was a truck picking up that container. So to me, that is the biggest benefit of being an owner-operated port. Go ahead.
All right. So the question about the Leatherman terminal, thank you, David. I appreciate that. It is operational now. We've completed the first phase of the container terminal, and there's room for 2 more. So we've already started construction on the second, but it is fully operational. Now, there is a labor dispute that's been ongoing a little bit for some time now on that specific terminal, related to a contract between the union and the carriers. So that is ongoing, but the Leatherman terminal is fully operational.
Thanks, Travis. Do we know what the price difference is for drayage in New Jersey versus South Carolina?
And the answer is less than half. It's a much better price. The turnaround time obviously is much better, and we can do a lot more containers a day. And you'll see the difference in your chassis, your paid chassis days, things like that.
Excellent. Thanks, David. What kind of capacity do we currently have at our facilities on the West Coast, New Jersey, and Charleston?
Robert, you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have on the West Coast, we have 3 facilities in the Inland Empire area. For those of you that are familiar with Southern California, it's Ontario, Chino, that arena there. We probably have right now about 60 to 80,000 square feet available as it relates to today. Obviously that changes, and products come in and out, so that varies, but that's pretty consistent right now. On the East Coast, we have on the Northeast, we also have 3 facilities, probably about 120,000 square feet available in that arena, being that we have more facilities and are able to distribute that space easier. And then in the Charleston area, in our 342,000 square foot facility, I think we have about 200,000 available today. 100 and something thousand is already occupied, and so we're trying to fill that up now. So that's certainly something that we have available if you need us.
Excellent. Travis, are there any requirements for truckers and trucks accessing the port?
The only requirement that you need is similar to any other marine terminal, is a transportation worker identification credential, so a TWIC card. And most folks that know the port industry or have any experience pulling containers would know exactly what that is. It's sort of very similar to a TSA pre-check in terms of how you get that security clearance. But that is all you need to access the marine terminals. And then for the inland ports in Greer and Dillon, the TWIC card is not required. So just a valid driver's license.
Thank you for that. What is the receiving policy for vessels?
I think that one would be for me as well. So we have a 7-day window prior to the ship working. So the gates for the trucks can come in and out 5 to 5 Monday through Saturday, but the terminals are 24/7. But the vessels do open up 7 days prior to the last receipt date, and all that information can be found on our website.
Excellent. How do you price out the scope of work for new customers?
So I'll take that one. As with our services, it's very customizable, and it really depends on our customer specific needs. So anyone that has that needs a quote or a price, should please reach out to us. We'll send out a questionnaire that really details your business, that helps us understand your business, and we customize a quote accordingly.
Okay, the next question is, where else are your customers asking IronLink to potentially expand to? Specifically, any new port markets?
Robert, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. So right now we have what we think are the 3 major ports in the U.S. covered quite well. If we need to go to a different market for a specific requirement, I think the only place left would probably be Houston or somewhere in Texas, that Houston port. But I think from what the coverage that we have available today, I think we've got that pretty well covered. There are no current plans to go to another port like that, but certainly if the requirement was needed, then we definitely entertain it. One of the things you'll find with us is that we will, as part of the solution, re-engineer our models to accommodate the demand. So that's available if needed.
Thank you, Robert. Per local drayage, will the barge industry have an effect on local drayage from 3PL or asset-based carriers' perspective?
All right, I'll take that one. So we are setting up a barge, a regular barge, to move containers from our Wando terminal over to our new Hugh Leatherman terminal, and from there, those containers will get brought to the rail. So these are intermodal boxes. It's going to be a daily barge, but it's only going to be a few hundred containers. So in the broad scheme of things, we did 3 million TEU last year, roughly, through the port. So a couple hundred containers a week. It'll be helpful in alleviating some congestion and traffic on the roads in Charleston, but you shouldn't see a noticeable change in available business for truckers.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis. Another question for you. Are the containers available immediately, or do we have to wait for the whole vessel to be unloaded?
Great question. The import containers are available immediately upon vessel discharge. So as soon as your container comes off of the ship and is scanned by one of our operators, you can send a truck in to come pick that container up. Now, single mission turn times at the Wando terminal, which is our main terminal, 30 minutes or less. And on top of that, if this is a hot container, if there's a priority box, you can let me know. We can set up notifications so that you and your team receive an email as soon as that container comes off the ship. So very, very flexible, very quick, easy to access your container. On the flip side, if for whatever reason you need to meter the flow, the outbound flow, if you don't have room for the product and you want it to just sit a little bit, we can do that as well. So again, that's some of the benefits of being an owner-operator port. And thank you for the question.
And this is our last question. What sectors are you targeting where you expect near-term growth for your business?
I can take that. So, right now, aside from that southeast area where we think there's going to be a huge influx of new business coming out. Obviously the Midwest from a distribution point is another arena that we're looking for to try to bridge that gap in terms of the transportation costs. So that's probably, if I had to say, that's probably the next area that we're looking to as an organization to expand to.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions that we have. If anyone else has any last minute questions, if they could type them in, that would be great. Otherwise,
Now,
thank you all for joining.
are you going to, can you let the group know what to expect after this event? Are they going to receive a recording, documentation, a copy of the presentation, things like that?
Yes, so immediately following the end of the broadcast, you'll receive an email with a link to replay the video. Whether you've joined or not, you'll still get the recording automatically. And we'll also be sending out a copy of the PDF version of the slides for everyone's review.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This is hopefully the first in a series of many that we plan to work with our customers to help them improve their operations, and hopefully we'll get to talk to everybody here soon.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you all, Robert. Thank you. I have to give Robert a shout out for putting this all together, and Brittany for holding everyone's hand through all of this. And Travis, thank you. Thank you for representing the Port of Charleston and being here with us. You're a great partner to work with. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.